I was standing 3 feet from my husband when he laughed and said it. She's just a trophy wife. A little outdated. The room froze. Investors. Journalists. Crystal glasses midair. And then he handed me divorce papers. Like it was the punchline to his joke. What no one in that room knew was that the restaurant we were celebrating existed because of me. My money. My contracts. My signature on every critical document. By the next morning, I would pull my investment. And within weeks, everything he built on my trust would begin to collapse. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about what happens when a woman stops being decorative and starts being deliberate. The word didn't sound loud. That was the worst part. Trophy. It slipped out of my husband's mouth smoothly, wrapped in humor, polished for an audience that wanted to be entertained. Laughter followed. Hesitant, uncomfortable, curious. The kind of laughter people use when they don't know if they should clap or leave. I stood beside him in a deep green dress he had chosen that morning. Hair styled the way he preferred. Smile practiced, controlled, ornamental. My name is Lena Brooks. I was 28 years old. And until that exact moment, I believed my marriage was a partnership. The age gap. The power imbalance. The way his world always came first. I told myself those were details, not warnings. He was holding court in Aurelian, the luxury restaurant opening that night in downtown Seattle. Cameras everywhere. Investors in tailored suits. A future he believed belonged entirely to him. Then he reached into his jacket. Not for a ring. Not for a toast. An envelope. Since we're making announcements, he said casually, I might as well be honest. He smiled at me. I'm filing for divorce. A man in my position needs someone who can keep up. The room went silent. They watched me the way people watch a car crash, waiting to see if I would scream. I didn't. I took the envelope. Nodded once. Thank you for the clarity, I said. And I walked out. I drove home in silence. The skyline blurred past my windshield, bright and indifferent. I didn't open the envelope. Not yet. The word he used kept repeating in my head. Outdated. Like a tool past its usefulness. Like something decorative that had lost its shine. What he never understood, what he never bothered to learn, was that I had been successful long before him. I worked in private finance. Graduated near the top of my class. Managed portfolios larger than most people ever see. When my grandmother passed away, she left me more than money. She left me control. Over $3 million. Earned, protected, documented. I didn't gamble it. I studied it. And when I met my husband, then a charming restaurateur with ambition but limited capital, I believed in him. That belief built his dream. And that belief was about to be withdrawn. I didn't cry that night. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because something colder had taken its place. Clarity. The next morning, I opened the envelope. The divorce papers were already signed. Not by me. By him. Dated 3 weeks earlier. He hadn't made an impulsive joke on stage. He'd followed a script. As I sat at my kitchen table, coffee untouched, memories rearranged themselves. The past 2 years suddenly made sense. The way he'd stopped asking my opinion. The way meetings ran late when finances came up. The way my name slowly disappeared from conversations. About a restaurant I had helped build from nothing. At first, I thought it was stress. Then I thought it was ego. Now I understood. It was strategy. When Aurelian was still an idea scribbled on napkins, he had been charming and attentive. He called me his partner. Asked for my input. Listened carefully when I spoke. I believed that meant respect. What it really meant was necessity. I pulled up my old emails. Investment drafts. Revisions. Signed agreements. There it was, clear as daylight. I wasn't just an investor. I was the primary investor. 70% of the startup capital. 100% of the early risk. The reason the bank said yes. The reason suppliers trusted him. The reason the lease was approved. And yet, at some point, I had been quietly removed from the narrative. I remembered the first time it happened. We were at a private dinner with potential backers. I mentioned cost controls. He interrupted me mid-sentence. "Let's not bore them with numbers," he laughed. "My wife's brilliant, but she worries too much." Everyone smiled. I smiled too. I shouldn't have. From that night on, it became routine. He spoke for both of us. Decided without me. Presented my caution as weakness. When I questioned expenses, he called me negative. When I asked for reports, he called me controlling. When I reminded him whose money was on the line, he said I was making it personal. The final proof came quietly. I didn't marry him because I loved him. I married him because I had no choice. At 24, my family was drowning in medical debt, and his mother offered me a deal I couldn't refuse. 1 year. No love. No questions. He was a ruthless lawyer, cold, arrogant, untouchable. And from the first night, he made it clear. This marriage is just a contract. But then I started noticing things I wasn't supposed to see. Locked rooms. Bruised hands. Late-night phone calls he thought I couldn't hear. The man everyone feared was hiding something dangerous. And the moment I discovered his secret, my life was no longer just a lie. It became a target. Because falling in love with my husband was the most dangerous mistake I ever made. I used to believe that if you worked hard enough, life would eventually be fair. I was wrong. I was 24 when everything began to collapse. My father had been sick for almost a year, and every hospital visit carved another hole into our savings. I worked 2 jobs, barely slept, and still watched the bills pile up on the kitchen table like silent threats. That was when Evelyn Harper entered my life. She was the managing partner of Harper Lowe Legal Group, a woman whose name alone could silence a room. When her assistant called and said she wanted to see me, I assumed it was about a clerical mistake or an internship referral. I never imagined she would look me in the eyes and say, "I want you to marry my son." At first, I laughed. Then I realized she wasn't joking. Her son, Lucas Reed, was a senior attorney at the firm. Everyone knew him. Brilliant. Arrogant. Untouchable. He had never lost a case and never smiled unless it benefited him. "He needs a wife," Evelyn said calmly. "And you need money." She didn't say it cruelly. She said it like a fact. 1 year of marriage. No love. No emotional expectations. In exchange, she would cover every medical expense my family had, and more. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself it was survival. And that was how I signed away a year of my life. The wedding took place on a gray afternoon in early autumn. No guests. No music. No joy. Lucas stood beside me in a perfectly tailored suit, his expression unreadable. When the officiant asked if he accepted me as his wife, he answered without hesitation, but without emotion. That night, he laid out the rules. "We will not share a bedroom," he said. "We will not interfere in each other's lives. This is an arrangement, not a relationship." I nodded. I thought I could live like that. But living with Lucas was like living with a locked door. He left early. Returned late. Sometimes didn't come home at all. When he did, his hands were often bruised, his eyes exhausted. Not the exhaustion of long meetings, but something heavier. I tried not to care. I reminded myself why I was there. But curiosity is dangerous. And marriage, even a fake one, has a way of pulling you closer than you expect. At first, I told myself not to notice the strange details. But when you live under the same roof as someone, even silence starts to speak. Lucas rarely slept. Most nights, I woke up to the sound of the front door closing quietly around 2 or 3 in the morning. Sometimes, he wouldn't come home at all. Other times, he returned before dawn, smelling faintly of rain and cigarette smoke, neither of which belonged to our pristine home. Once, while handing him a glass of water, I noticed his knuckles. Bruised. Split. Fresh. "You should be more careful," I said without thinking. He froze for half a second. "It's nothing," he replied, pulling his hand away. Lawyers didn't come home injured like that. Not the kind who spent their days in courtrooms and conference rooms. Then there were the rooms. One door at the end of the hallway was always locked. Another room had blackout curtains drawn at all hours. And his phone, always on silent, always face down. Late one night, I heard him arguing in a low voice. "You promised," he said sharply. "No, I don't care what it costs." I stood on the stairs, heart pounding, listening to a side of him I had never seen. That night, I realized something dangerous. I didn't know the man I had married at all. The truth came to me on a night I should have stayed in my room. Lucas forgot to lock the door. It was raining heavily, thunder rattling the windows, and the house felt too quiet. When I passed the hallway, I noticed the door slightly open, the one I had never been allowed near. Inside, the room was nothing like I expected. No luxury. No comfort. Just files. Stacks and stacks of case folders. Newspaper clippings pinned to the wall, photographs of people whose faces had been crossed out in red marker. Names circled. Dates highlighted. Words like dismissed, threatened, missing. My chest tightened. These weren't high-profile clients. They were people who had lost. Victims no one defended. I picked up a folder and read until my hands started shaking. Lucas Reed wasn't using his real name on these cases. He was operating in secret, challenging powerful corporations, criminal networks, and corrupt officials who buried evidence and destroyed lives. If anyone found out. The door slammed behind me. I turned. Lucas stood there, soaked from the rain, eyes dark with fury and fear. "You were never supposed to see this," he said. "Why?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why are you risking everything?" He looked exhausted. "Because someone has to," he said quietly. "And because if they know who I am, they'll come for the people around me." That was when it hit me. I wasn't just his fake wife. I was his weakness. He wanted me out of it. Wanted distance. Protection. But the more he pushed me away, the closer I felt to him. I saw the kindness behind his cruelty. The loneliness behind his arrogance. And without realizing it, I had fallen in love with a man I was never meant to love. The threats didn't start loudly. They crept in quietly, like a shadow you only notice when it's already behind you. At first, it was small things. A black car parked across the street for hours. Unknown numbers calling and hanging up. Flowers delivered with no card. Lucas noticed immediately. I could tell by the way his jaw tightened, the way his eyes scanned every room when we entered together. "Don't go out alone," he told me one night. "And don't tell anyone where you're going." That was the first time fear truly settled in my chest. Then the messages came. "Stay away. You're not supposed to be here. He can't protect you." Lucas tried to hide it from me, but I saw the cracks forming. He stopped sleeping again. Stopped touching me. Stopped letting me close. The colder he became, the more terrified I felt. Not of the danger, but of losing him. One evening, I finally confronted him. "You're shutting me out," I said. "Why?" He didn't raise his voice. "That was worse. Because this marriage was a mistake," he replied. The words felt like a slap. "I can't protect you," he continued. "And I won't let you get hurt because of me." That night, he slept on the couch. The space between us felt heavier than any threat. The next day, everything exploded. I was followed. I knew at the moment my instincts screamed. Footsteps too close. Breathing I could hear but not see. A hand grabbed my arm. I don't remember screaming. I remember falling. And then, darkness. I woke up in a hospital bed. White lights. Beeping machines. A dull ache spreading through my body. Lucas was there. His face was pale, eyes red, hands shaking as he held mine. "I told you to stay away," he whispered, broken. "This is my fault. The doctors said I was lucky. Bruises. A concussion. Nothing permanent. But something inside me shattered. That night, after he fell asleep in the chair beside me, I made my decision. If I stayed, he would destroy himself trying to protect me. If I left, maybe he could finally win his fight. I wrote him a letter. Not a goodbye. A thank you. I left before sunrise. Moved to a small town under my aunt's name. Changed my number. Cut every visible tie. The contract was still valid. But my heart was already gone. Weeks passed. Silence. Then one evening, my phone rang. Lucas had been attacked. Shot while leaving court. The case he had fought for years had finally reached the surface, and powerful people were desperate. I didn't think. I ran. At the hospital, he looked smaller than I had ever seen him. Machines surrounded him. His strength finally spent. When his eyes opened and found me, tears slipped down his face. You came back, he whispered. I never left, I said. That was the moment everything changed. We exposed the truth together. Evidence released. Names revealed. Careers destroyed. The threats disappeared. And the man I loved finally stopped hiding. Lucas survived. But the man who woke up weeks later was no longer the same. The danger forced everything into the open. The evidence he had hidden for years was finally released to the public. Documents, recordings, witness testimonies, everything powerful people had tried to bury was dragged into the light. The city shook. Careers collapsed overnight. Executives resigned. Judges were investigated. And Lucas Reed, once known as a ruthless, arrogant lawyer, became a name people whispered with respect. He didn't celebrate. He barely spoke. When I visited him during his recovery, he stared out the hospital window for long stretches of time, as if the fight had drained something deep inside him. I'm tired, he admitted one night. Tired of hiding. Tired of pretending I'm strong. I sat beside him and held his hand. For the first time, he said quietly, I want a normal life. When he was discharged, we returned home together. The house felt different. No locked doors. No secrets. No shadows waiting in the corners. The contract sat in a drawer between us, still valid, still binding. But neither of us mentioned it. As months passed, life softened. Lucas stopped working late every night. He cooked badly and laughed at himself. He learned my habits, how I liked my tea, how silence sometimes meant comfort, not distance. One evening, he asked me, if you hadn't been forced into this, would you still have stayed? The question terrified me. I didn't answer right away. I don't know, I said honestly. But I know this, if I had walked past you without knowing you, I would have missed the love of my life. He didn't speak. He just pulled me into his arms and held me like someone afraid of losing the ground beneath his feet. The day the contract expired came quietly. No dramatic countdown. No arguments. Lucas placed the papers on the table. You're free, he said. No debts. No obligation. No pressure. I picked them up. The same documents that had once saved my family. And trapped my heart. Slowly, deliberately, I tore them in half. I'm not staying because I have to, I said. I'm staying because I choose you. His hands shook. Are you sure? He asked. I've never been more sure of anything. We married again. Not in a courtroom. Not under obligation. But in a small garden at dusk. No powerful guests. No expectations. Just us. When Lucas said his vows, his voice broke. I spent my life fighting the world, he said. And you taught me how to live in it. I cried. So did he. Years later, people still asked me how it felt to marry a man I didn't love at first. I always smiled. Love doesn't always begin gently, I said. Sometimes it begins as survival. Lucas opened a legal foundation for victims who couldn't afford representation. I went back to school, finally chasing the life I had once put on hold. We were never perfect. But we were honest. And that made all the difference. I was forced to marry a man I feared. I chose to love the man he truly was. And that choice changed everything.